to the statistics about the opinion Victorians have of their police force in a minute. But just before then, the Victorian government, has the Victorian government ever acknowledged that it trampled over long-established parliamentary checks and balances and fundamental freedoms?
No, they haven't, and not even, in fact, have the taxpayer-funded protectors of our human rights in Victoria. The Human Rights Commission has basically waved through all the measures that have been done. Parliaments, of course, were prevented from scrutinising much of this. Certainly any power they had to annul or review the public health orders were taken away, and that's when Parliament was allowed to sit at all. There's been nothing from government itself to ever suggest that they regret any of these actions.
It just comes back to think tanks like the IPA to shine a light on this. I mean, as you point out, not even the Human Rights Commissions, and we have half a dozen of them in the country, were up in arms about this. It's quite astonishing, really, isn't it?
Well, it is. I mean, when we saw Zoe Buhler, that terrible footage of her at Ballarat, mother being handcuffed and arrested in her own kitchen, in her own home, in front of her children for a Facebook post. And that was the opportunity then that those Human Rights Commission had to say, enough is enough, this is just outrageous, but that never came.
Well, I'd like to read you a sentence from the second report, Criminalising Everyday Behaviour. And I find it chilling. And the quote is, quote, "Millions of people who had meticulously observed the criminal law all their lives were suddenly under active purview of police for engaging in what was previously routine and harmless conduct," unquote. Now, to their credit, most of the Victorians who were fined for what was previously harmless conduct haven't paid the fines. Good on them. Scott, how many fines were issued and how many are outstanding?
Over 50,000 fines were issued during the pandemic in Victoria, and the information we have suggests that about half of those, maybe slightly more than half, remain unpaid.
Wow. Well, what should happen next? I mean, should those fines just be, should those fines just be lifted?
Yeah, well, the IPA has called for a general amnesty on those fines, Fred, because, as we say, there was never any business for getting the criminal law involved in that. And certainly those who are not paying, we think they're actually issuing their own silent protest. And what's happening now is it's descended into a bit of a ridiculous ad hoc situation in Victoria. We read at one stage that the Black Lives Matter protest organisers, they were going to have the charges against them withdrawn. But then the next day they decided to proceed after all. Out of the blue, Zoe Buhler, having waited nearly 2 years to be told what her fate was to be, was informed that those charges were going to be withdrawn. So there's clearly some knowledge in the depths of the state of Victoria that these fines were outrageous. They're impossible to prosecute if they were ever tested in court. This is the time for a general amnesty to say, let's start the process of rebuilding trust in our state institutions, and any fines that have been paid should be refunded.